My name is Catherine Caine, and I've been a habit of mind practitioner for about 30 years now, since 1992. And I'm basically an elementary school teacher, and I loved using the habits of mind in my elementary school classroom.
And just what are you doing now, Catherine? Just to give people the inspiration of what you do after you retire.
After I retired, I was hired on by, well, actually, before I retired, I worked both the DOE and Hawaii Pacific University. And at Hawaii Pacific University, it's my give back. I train teachers, and I put a lot of teachers at Waikiki Elementary School, pre-service teachers, and I follow them into the classroom, and I put them with our habit of mind teachers, because I feel that it's very important for them to have really best practices under their belt as they move into their own classroom. So I didn't want to just leave the profession. I wanted to leave the profession and support it at the same time. So although I'm not teaching young children anymore, I'm helping by touching a student teacher, and then I'm going to have more children that I touch in that way, other than just my classroom.
Oh, that's so beautiful. So, I know that it was a while ago, 30 years ago, that you actually started, but I know you have an incredibly good memory. So I'm going to ask you to just channel those moments back a little bit, because some of the people who will be watching this are going to be wondering about it. And I think the thing I hear the most is people say, and you probably have heard it yourself, there's so much on my plate right now. I just don't know whether I have time for another thing. What would be your perspective on that?
Well, I'm not going to delude you. It is another thing, but it's another thing that adds so much depth to what you do in your school. And it's not a siloed thing where you just teach a habit of mind necessarily. It runs through your curriculum. And what happens when it runs through your curriculum and you point it out to your students and you utilize it yourself is the learning gets deeper. Our brains are always looking for that connectivity. And when your brain looks for that connectivity, it's the habit of mind that's the tapestry thread that runs through everything that you do, from thinking about your thinking all the way to the way you behave when you, as Art says, when you don't know the right answer yet. So an example of that would be a research project that I used to do. Now, most classes start, in our school, we started doing research with second grade. And I've been a second grade teacher for a while. I've taught quite a few grade levels. But teaching the children to do the research project was just part of it. One of the things that we did was we reflected what habits of mind would you need to be a good researcher. So it starts with the question, what does a good researcher do? And sure enough, they have to be persistent. They have to think about their thinking. And so at the end of this month-long research project, we have these beautiful products, but we also end with a reflection. The reflection is, what habits of mind did you use? And then I go into the idea that now when you get to third grade, you're going to know where to begin. So you see it crosses grade levels, it silos across content areas, and that's what gives it the depth and the strength, and that's what makes it so worthwhile.
Well, actually, that's wonderful, because it leads to the second question, which, as you said, it gives it the depth because it goes to third grade. But how do you get everybody in a school to really say, this is what we want to do? What was your experience with that?
First of all, it's not just someone telling you what to do. There's an empowerment of the teachers through consensus. There was a lot of building of consensus. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? How does the habits of mind fit into your life? And how does it extend to the classroom? So I think the buy-in, truthfully, begins with that empowering of the teachers, listening with empathy and understanding to the faculty. The administration doesn't come in and say to you, we're going to be doing this and this and this for habits of mind. It's, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what we need to do. Let's talk about our students' needs, because after all, that's what we're there for. We're there to hear what our students' needs are. And so we began to percolate in an intellectual community. So there was a lot of discussion, empowering of teachers. And the nice piece of it was our teachers felt that they were innovative and creative. And as a teacher, it's such a gift to have that innovation. And so what we would do is we would have about once a month, we'd bring in things that we would share with our class. So we'd lay all these things out on the table of how we did habits of mind within our class. One really memorable piece was problem solving, question posing and problem solving around Thanksgiving. One of my partners said, had the turkey. So the children solved the turkey's problem with being eaten on Thanksgiving. And the book is just that she creates every year has so much creation and innovation. But it was that focus on problem solving. I remember one page, the turkey pretended it was a dog and hid in a doghouse. I mean, so I think we were given freedom, intellectually valued as teachers. And truthfully, Ben, not everybody bought in. Some people needed more structure. Some people wanted that, just the academic curriculum. So some people did retire or they left. But generally speaking, people were really excited because it was about us.
A couple of things that seem to be really important. One thing that you're saying is that this was the vision of the school, and if after a significant amount of time, a couple of years, you're saying you don't fit with that vision, then it's not that you need to change, it's that you probably need to find a school where you are a better fit, because this is what we intend to do.
Yes, and I think I'm being very honest with that. I hate to say that some people they wanted something different than that, because I'm so vested in habits of mind. But yes, people, and I have to say, in my recollection, 30 years ago, there was one person who retired, and then there was a couple of people who moved to a more structured school, which we wish them well, and they did well, and we still communicate with them. And then at one point, I think about 8 or 9 years into Habit of Mind, we lost half of our faculty to retirement.
Oh my.
We lost 6. We had a very small faculty. It's much larger now, but we lost half of our faculty, and it was very disconcerting. We were thinking, oh my goodness, how do we hire people into our culture and help them to see it? And so what happened was the principals basically said, we are a Habit of Mind school. What do you know about that? So it became part of how we hire people and what we want people to understand about us before they come to us.
So what I'm understanding is that in the process of you actually going through the hiring process, it strengthened your identity as a Habits of Mind school. Exactly. And helped everyone get clear about a way to articulate that, which then gave you, as I see your body language, even it gave you a sense of such pride. It was like, this is who we are. And now we invite you to join us, but this is what we do, which is very strong. And I hear in what you're saying, the strength of the leadership, because in the absence of that, that might not have happened. But because you had such a strong principal who really wanted this to happen, her leadership really made such a difference.
Yes, and that was Cheryl Littman. The first principal I was under was Doris Choi, Cheryl Littman, and then Bonnie came back to us. When I started, Bonnie was a counselor, and then she went to
Bonnie
become
Troxel.
Bonnie Tabor.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure people knew who you were talking about.
Yes, Bonnie Tabor, sorry. But yes, Bonnie Tabor came back to us and stayed for 17 years before we retired, before she and I retired together. But it was interesting how each leadership listened to the teachers, valued the teachers, saw the students' needs, and supported that through habits of mind. It was a very big buy-in by the administration too.
Okay, so for people who are listening to this, if you're at all interested, we have some beautiful movies, videos of this wonderful school, Waikiki School, and you'd be able to go to our website. We'll put a link onto this so that if you wanted to see more of the school in action, then you'd be able to at least see a little piece of it. And so another question that I hear very often is, so 16's a lot. And do they ever cluster? Do you ever, I sort of heard you saying it, like when you said we did research, I heard you clustering some, like some got together and made sense. Can you talk a little bit about how you managed to invest everyone in 16 and at the same time realize the relationship among them?
Exactly. And they are very interrelated. So one of the things that we felt very strongly about is a school-wide focus. So we had a monthly mindful focus, and we chose habits of mind that matched the things that we were doing in that month. For instance, when we tested in April, we were using precision and accuracy. When we had a variety show, we used responsible risk-taking in January. But what we found is the ones that we selected for that 9 months of school, we also could, when you selected problem solving, you got your flexibility in thinking, and those came together. Okay. The other thing that we did was really important is the natural clusters that happen are begin to be recognized by the students themselves. And a good example of that was I made these cards for habits of mind. And they were sitting on my railing on my whiteboard. So I'd give directions, and then all of a sudden I'd say, I'm wondering what habits of mind we can use for this. And the students would tell me 3, because we decided to keep it to just 3 for this activity. So during that lesson, I'd post the 3. In the middle of the lesson, when they were doing the action or the activity or interacting or collaborating, I'd ring a bell and I'd say, I'm just curious, could you give me some examples? Have you used these 3? And what others did you use? So we were always interacting with how we did things. What we do is important, but how we do it is just as important. So that began to get clusters going. The other thing that we discovered was Dr. Jackson's philosophy for children. And those are gentle Socratic circles. And we've been doing that for about 18 years now. And so the students come up, they question, pose, and problem solve in this discussion. But it also, the students, before we start the circle, I ask them again, what habits of mind are we going to be using? Of course, they have to listen to each other with empathy and understanding for a circle of safety. They also have to take a risk if they're going to speak their mind. And then the third thing that they do is the question and problem posing. And the questions that come from the students are really great wonderings. And we explore them. We're not looking for particularly an answer or something that is, that's it. That's the line, that's where it is. We're looking for thinking. We're looking to use these habits of mind for thinking. And so that's another cluster. Math, if you look at the math Common Core, that has a cluster of, where it has persistence, it has all the vocabulary. that is habits of mind. So as the Common Core came through, you look at the mathematics problem solving, and it is habits of mind. And so all of those things begin to cluster themselves, and they are integrated. If you do problem solving, you are a flexible thinker, you have to be a risk taker. So students begin to see that, and teachers begin to see that, and we begin to integrate not only the habits of mind into the content, but a cluster of them as the lesson calls for, or in my cases, the students thought they would use.
We are looking at a time when social and emotional learning is so important. And also the whole idea of being culturally responsive. Our classrooms are increasingly more diverse and more, we have to pay more attention to all the rich, wonderful, diverse things that are going on in our classrooms. And so it seems like in a certain way, it's another, what happens is, and I'm sure over 30 years you've seen this, what happens is the habits of mind are classic, but they are very adaptive to any changes in the social environment. So talk a little bit about how you see that in terms of culturally responsive, social emotional learning. What's happening right now that the habits of mind are making a rich connection and adaptation with?
I think that for our school, I think the expectations have been raised for the students through habits of mind. I think they're expected to do more, expected to accomplish more. It is a positive, nurturing place where I can do this. And we're not just saying, you can do this. Do you understand? We're asking, what questions might you have? We're asking them to pose questions. We're listening to them with empathy and understanding. So I think the way that we've transitioned away from being the purveyors of all that knowledge and that content has allowed our students to consider different intellectual ideas. And so I think that's where the strength of it has happened. When I first began at Waikiki School, it was very tiny, and we had a lot of Asian students, but now we have students from all over the world. We have from Italy, family from Switzerland. And so no matter what happens, the culture of the classroom bubbles up into the habits of mind. And there's always that vehicle of the habits of mind that levels the playing field, but also brings the expectations higher for each and every child, and I think that is really an important piece. The other piece for me is how people learn. And again, I mentioned the brain again, because my son is into neuroscience and that's been his whole thing. And so the brain is looking for connectivity. So no matter what ethnic diversity you have, they're looking for that connectivity to each other and to the content. And I think the thread that goes through with habits of mind is exactly that. It's that connectivity. From that connection, then the depth begins, the expectations begin. I think it was 3 years after we started Habits of Mind, we surveyed our students to see how our teaching had changed. And one of the things the students said really made me laugh. They said, school is a lot harder. You have to think a lot more because the teachers aren't giving you just one answer. And so I think that we're challenging our students to be the best they can. So no matter what is going on at school, no matter who you have walking through that door, you problem solve it and you think about their needs, because that's really why we're there. We're there for all students. And so Habits of Mind helps us to reach them and helps them to reach their goals of being part of something bigger than just themselves.
Now, there are people who are using character education or something called pride How does it
Right.
fit so that you don't have like lots of different acronyms, but that, you're kind of, how do you put all that together with the habits of mind, or do you not?
Well, you're talking to someone who doesn't believe in having a program. I don't believe in having a program for social emotional learning. I believe in having a process rather than a program. And I think if you have a program such as Pride, which I'm not really familiar with, Benna, truthfully, I think what you have is you have a program, a way of looking at it and step by step, whereas Habits of Mind is more an intellectual pursuit and more of a process that continues through your life. So it's, to me, if you're using a program such as Pride, your students will begin integrating habits of mind into any program that you bring to the forefront. They'll find it. For instance, if you're reading a book to your students and you're saying, I wonder what habits of mind are here, the students will pretty much be able to tell you what habits of mind, and they can connect that with, well, how does that connect with Pride? So I just believe in mostly a process rather than that kind of a product for that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, thank you, because I knew that Waikiki did not have such things, but I also thought that people who are first coming into habits of mind may be coming in with something that they already had as a program, as you said. And so their question is, how many things can we manage? But I think what you've described is what I would have anticipated you might say, which is the driver is the process.
Yes.
And that, in fact, there are product-oriented programs. Each one means something, just as like character education, where it's about respect and about honesty, all of which are very well served by the processes that are and behaviors that are promoted in the habits of mind. So for people who are trying to make that connection and bring that about for their schools, it doesn't have to be an abrupt, we'll either do this or this, but it can be something. So you used in the very beginning of our talk together, you used the metaphor of tapestry. And I think that's what we would end with, which is that habits of mind really does create a tapestry for all the things that you're doing in the school, as it was with Waikiki. So thank you so much for being able to talk with us.
It's my pleasure, Benna. Thanks for having me.